Hey, how y'all doing? Oh, come on, you can get a little louder than that. Good. Hey, I'm glad you guys are here. My name is Josh, and one of the pastors, and so thankful you're here. Welcome those who are online or at any of our campuses, and just been a great week. I just want to give a shout out right now because I've had a couple people ask when I was in the lobby. People were like, "Hey, how'd Sunday night go? How did the new Coastal campus go?" And let me just tell you, phenomenal. All right, God showed up in a major way. Had a ton of new people there, a bunch of young adults, just great stuff. So let's just give God the praise for that right now. Yeah. So if you're new with us, you might be going, okay, why are we clapping? But we are a church that meets in multiple locations, and we just opened a brand new location right across from the university in University Commons. We function out of the C3 Coffee Bar there, and it's been great. And just trust tonight's going to be a phenomenal night there. I know that Matt's going to be preaching there tonight, and it's going to be great, and going to have a lot of college students and young adults and people who live in the Carolina Forest area. So be praying for that campus, and just be praying for everything that's going on there. So I'm excited about this theme that we're diving into called Stranger Things. And last night I was up late finishing off season 2. So for any of you guys who are there, don't worry that there will be no spoiler alerts, anything like that. I won't hit that. But as we think about Stranger Things, let me hit it this way at first. Clay brought up some strange logos that have some hidden images in them, and once you see them, you can't help but not see them, and that's kind of the hope that we have when we look at the book of Revelation today. But there's also some things that we just have to come to an agreement on when we think about strange things, all right? Because like we live in a strange world, and when I was prepping for this message, I started thinking, okay, how do I dive into this topic? And I started thinking, well, let's go and look at some of those strange news events that happen, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever looked at wacky news and strange news, and I started to do that, and I thought, well, that's some good stories. But then my mind started taking me a different direction, and I thought, well, no, probably the best way for us to jump into this is just to come to a consensus across the room that we are all a bunch of strange people, okay? Like honestly, that we're all strange, and we're strange for different reasons, all right? One of the reasons we're strange is due to some of our habits. Like, I found some habits that we as people have. For instance, 40% of the people in this room pick their scabs. And I see some of y'all looking at somebody sitting next to you, right? And I know what happens because I don't know what the percentage is off of that, but I know there's a high percentage. If you pick your scab, you also, some of you do that. And that's weird, okay? Here's another thing that's weird. 79% of the people in the room make their bed, all right? Now I'm a bed maker, all right? Not a bed wetter, okay? A bed maker. That's me. I like to kind of, I don't do it real well, but just enough to make it look kind of fit. But the strange thing is, I know this, that there's about 21% of you in the room going, why in the world would you waste your time making your bed? All right. You know, I know that's thing. It can get stranger. This one is weird. 7% of the men in the room right now are not wearing underwear. And hey, if it's you, I don't want to know. We don't want to know. Don't be raising your hand. Because that's just weird. And it's okay to go commando at home, but not at church, all right? But we can go weirder. Here's another one that's weird. 38% of people will not sit on a public toilet. All right. Now, what's the weird stat? That 62% of you do. That's the weird one to me, because I'm in that 38% category. If you know me, I'm a little bit of a germaphobe, all right? Like, I love my own germs, I just don't like y'all's. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just me, all right? Here, the last stat I'll give you is this. That 1 out of every 4 people in this room will pee in the pool. 1 out of every 4. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's her, all right? 1 out of 2 people pee in the shower, okay? I mean, those are just weird, all right? Which means, like, if you look around the room, like, you fit one of those categories, and that's just some strange things. Strange things. People staying up late till like 1:30 in the morning to watch Stranger Things. Binge watching, all that. Now, if you happen to be a fan of this little Netflix movie, great. It's fun. I'm not even really going to talk a whole lot about this. Really, all we're doing with their title is using it as a springboard to get us into another discussion. But I will say this much about that Netflix series, that it's a series that, it happens in 1983 and 1984 with some middle school boys. All right, now, I'll be honest, showing my age right now, I was in middle school in 1983 and 1984. The TV series takes place in Indiana. I was in middle school in 1983 and 1984 in Indiana. So when I watch it, like, I'm back home, you know what I mean? Like I'm seeing, the topography. I'm seeing the 80s culture and the pop culture and all that. And I find myself kind of going, oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember that song. I remember this and all that. But then the next part of the series where it goes is it's just some young boys and a crew of people, and they find themselves encountering another world, a world that they call the upside down world, and or the upside down as they call it. And in the whole premise of the show is that they realize that it's not just the world they're living in, but there's this whole other world. And because this whole other world, there's a lot of strange things that are happening. And they spend the whole series trying to make sense of the world that they are living in. And that's the springboard I want to use for us. Because that's where we find ourselves right now. That's where the church has found itself for 2,000 years. That we are a people that live in this world, but there's a whole nother world out there that we really can't see, but that whole other world, that spirit world, that spiritual world, has a major effect on the world that we live in. And when you come to understand that it's not just about this place here on earth, but there is a whole nother spiritual world, then what we need to do as people is try to come to senses, to try to make sense of all that so that we know how to live. And that's really what the book of Revelation is all about. It's a letter from God to help us to make sense of the world that we live in and the world that He lives in, and how those two can come together. Now, for some people, when you think about the study in Revelation, some people would be like, man, that makes me nervous, or that's a little scary, or that's a little weird, or maybe you're here and you're like, man, I have no faith background, I have no Bible background, I know nothing about the book of Revelation, so am I going to be totally lost? No. Because here's my belief: if that's you, then the things that you wrestle with right now is you wrestle with trying to make sense of this world. And you wrestle with trying to make sense of, is there an afterlife? Is there something more to this when my time on this earth is done? And then there's those of us who maybe have a faith in God or have a desire to understand the Bible. And then we look at the book of Revelation. And then when we look at the book of Revelation, we're going, man, I don't even know if I want to study that. Because, well, one, it's just strange. It's just a strange book. And let's admit it, that it is a strange book. There are all kinds of signs and numbers and beasts and dragons and babies and angels and creatures and blood and war and tragedy. And if you try to look at it all real quick and you try to go, oh, it all means this and this, you'll go, man, it's just strange. And because it's strange, well, I'm just going to ignore it. And unfortunately, too many times, Christians, what we'll find is we'll totally ignore this book. will be like, I ain't reading that one because it's too strange and I can't figure it out, so I'm going to ignore it. But I want you to remember what you heard when Merck read this morning, when he read from Revelation chapter 1. What he read was this: blessed are those who read from this book. Anybody in here want to receive a blessing from God? Anybody want to receive the favor of God? Anybody want some good things to come in your life to make sense of this world that we're living? Well, Revelation chapter 1, verse 3 gives us a promise that when you read this book, you can be blessed. So it's a tragedy when we ignore it. But see, there's a problem that if some people put the book like way over here and they ignore it, there's a whole nother end of the spectrum where people actually abuse it. Where people will look at this book and they'll abuse it because they'll read way more into it than they should. That they'll take this book and they'll make it the crux of everything they do and every scripture they read. And here's what I mean by that. And I say this with all the love in my heart because I have some family members. I have some loved ones, some good friends that I've seen them go too far with this book. And here's what I mean by that. And you'll see this happen in society is people will look at it and they'll go, okay, if I take this number from this chapter and I'll take that number and put it with this number and this sign, it means this politician is the Antichrist. Or that's what they'll do. Or they'll say, if I take this verse and compare it to that verse and pull it this way, it means that Jesus will come back on this day of this month of this year. And anytime we do things like that, what we're actually doing is abusing the book. We're reading more into it than what God intends us to do. So we gotta figure out how to find the balance. But I know sometimes we struggle to find the balance because we go, but I'm confused with it. I'm confused. I'm confused because I don't really understand this concept of prophecy that's talked about in that book. I'm confused because I don't really understand the end times. And let me help you understand that a little bit. Okay? Because see, sometimes, like I say, we get confused and we abuse the book, one, because we think prophecy. Like we think everything in the book is about something in the future. Let me give you a little snippet. This is kind of interesting. If you take the word prophecy or to prophesy or that kind of aspect of that word and you trace it all throughout the Bible, that 17% of the time the word prophesy or prophecy is used in the Bible, it does mean futuristic event. Okay? Like for instance, you talk about a baby will be born in Bethlehem. That was a prophecy about a future event. 17% of the time, that's the case. But 83% of the time, when you see the word prophesy or prophecy, it's talking about right then. It's someone, a prophet, has received a message from God that he is communicating right then at that moment to those people to help them understand God and his will for their life. So we can't look at the book of Revelation and think, well, it's all about futuristic events. That's when we would abuse it. Another way to look at that is sometimes we'll say, well, it's all about end times. Well, yes, it is all about end times. But what are end times? If you look at scriptures and you let the Bible speak for itself, when the Bible speaks about end times or last days, it's talking about from the moment Jesus came to this earth till the moment he returns to this earth. Now, if we know our history timelines, that's about 2,000 years so far. All right. And we don't know when he's going to return yet, but he came to this earth about 2,000 years ago. So for 2,000 years, we've been living in end times or in the last days. And you might go, Josh, last time I checked, 2,000 years is not last days. That's a long time. Remember the God we serve? He's timeless. So 2,000 years to God is nothing but a snap of the fingers, nothing but a hiccup. So when God says end times, he can mean 2,000 years and no problem at all. I just know in our time frame, we don't think of it that way. But if we realize it from that angle, it can take some of the confusion out of the book. So let's try to simplify it a little bit. Let's try to simplify it, and let's look at this book, all right? Let me give you a couple things that'll simplify it real quick. One, all right? It is the book of Revelation, okay? There is no S on the end, all right? Just put that, like, for instance, Walmart is not the Walmarts, okay? So it's not the Revelations. It's Revelation, all right? That one's free for you. You can just put that in your pocket and you go, all right, I learned something in church today, all right? But it's the revelation of Jesus Christ. It's written, or maybe I should say recorded, by a guy named John. All right, and he identifies himself right at the beginning in verse 3, if I remember right. If not, it's verse 4. He says, I, John, all right? And with that, understand that most people, right, most theologians, most scholars would say that's the Apostle John. That's the guy who wrote the Gospel of John, or what we sometimes call the biography of Jesus written by John, or 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, the epistles, all right? So Revelation is written by a guy named John. It was written around AD 90. That's the date most scholars would put with it. Some guys would say maybe there was a chance that it was written around AD 64 or something. That was when the Emperor Nero was in charge, and he brought persecution into the land, into Jerusalem and the surrounding area. But most people, all right, the majority of theologian scholars would all say it happened around AD 90. And there was an emperor in charge called Domitian, I think is how you say his name. And he was the guy who persecuted Christians. He made it difficult on Christians. He allowed people to hold people's faith against them. So physically, they were at harm. Spiritually, they were questioning things. It was financially, they were struggling to get jobs. So it was a dark time for Christians in that area of the world. All right. So you've got the book of Revelation, recorded by John around AD 90, and it was written to a group of churches, meaning it was written to Christians who were alive during that day. All right. And he was writing to them what Jesus was telling them. And what Jesus was telling them is the secret of the book. And the secret of the book is this: Jesus is the King. Do you want to understand the book of Revelation? That's all you got to know. That's all you got to know. And if we will catch that Jesus is writing this book to let everyone know I'm the King. Now, I know if I was really to try to tease you, I'd say, well, come next week and I'll give you the secret of the book of Revelation. And then next week I'd say, now come the following week and let me give you the secret. And you keep going, no. I'd rather tell you the secret up front, because once we come to understand this in life, you can be blessed. Does that make sense? Jesus is the King. Well, how do we know that? How do we figure that part of the message out? All right. Well, let's just dive back into chapter 1, and let's let chapter 1 kind of show us this message that Jesus is King. All right. So it says this in Revelation chapter 1, verse 12. It says, when I turned, I there means John, when I turned to see who was speaking to me, I saw 7 gold lampstands, and standing in the middle of the lampstands was someone like the Son of Man. The lampstands represent the 7 churches that he is writing to. We'll talk all about that next week. All right. But anyway, and standing in the middle of the lampstands was someone like the Son of Man. Goes on to say this. My Bible's not working, so I'll do it this way. He had 7. Pretend like you didn't see any of that. All right, here we go. When I turned to see who was speaking to me, I saw 7 gold lampstands, and standing in the middle of the lampstands was someone like the Son of Man. He was wearing a long robe with a gold sash across his chest. His head and his hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like flames of fire. Make sure you catch that. His head and his hair were white like wool, white as snow, and his eyes were like flames of fire. His feet were like polished bronze, refined in a furnace, and his voice thundered like mighty ocean waves. He held 7 stars in his right hand, and a sharp 2-edged sword came from his mouth, and his face was like the sun in all of its brilliance. What I want you to picture here is this image that John turns, and when John turns, he sees someone like the Son of Man. Now, anytime in Scripture we see that phrase, Son of Man, we know it's in reference to Jesus. Every time in the Bible that term is used, it's pointing back to Jesus, all right? So we have someone like the Son of Man, and what does he look like? Well, he looks like something totally different than John has ever seen before. Because what John witnesses is he sees this image, this guy with his feet that are bronze, polished bronze. He sees a guy whose face is glowing like the sun, whose voice is thundering like the ocean, who's got a sword coming out of his mouth. His hair is standing on end, it's white like wool, and his eyes are like fire. He sees an image of Jesus that is different than any image he'd seen before. And the image he sees is a Jesus who means business. Easiest way for me to catch this. Anybody here ever grow up playing sports, like on a team? All right, you ever on a team? Any of y'all have a coach that looked like that at one point? Right? You know what I'm saying? Here's another way to say it. Every one of you was a kid at some point. Some of you are students right now. Ever seen your mom look like that at one point? You know what I'm talking about. You've seen your mom or your dad. That all of a sudden, it's like everything is all good. And next thing you know, it's like they got laser beams in their eyes, right? Like next thing you know, you're like, oh, mom means business right now. Dad means business. This is not dad coming in saying, hey, let's go hang out. Let's go throw the football. This is the look from dad going, listen, I've got something to say. And here's reality. Many times we don't like this image of Jesus because this isn't the grace-giving image that we're used to seeing. See, most of us, when we think of Jesus, we think of the Lamb of God type Jesus. Like when we think of Jesus, we think of the white Jesus, although he wasn't white, all right? Get that out of your mind. But we think Jesus white walking through the Middle East, all right? We picture this little shepherd guy with a lamb around his shoulders. We picture this guy sitting with kids on his lap, hanging out with the kids. We picture this guy reaching down and loving on the lost and healing the lepers and making the blind see. And that's who he was, okay? But our problem is many times that's the only image we have of Jesus. Or some of us, we don't even get that far. We get stuck in the Ricky Bobby world. You know what I mean? Like the little baby Jesus world. You know what I mean? Like that's all we can think of with Jesus. Or sometimes we move on to maybe the bloody Jesus on the cross. But most of the time, if I say, what's your picture of Jesus? This isn't the picture we have. And the reason why is because we're like, man, because that's a scary image. But I want you to make sure that this is the image that was also seen when Jesus walked on this earth. Let's not forget the Jesus who walked into the temple and threw over the tables and cast out the money changers because they were abusing people. Let's not forget the Jesus that picked up a whip and started cracking the whip and making the animals run because he was ticked off of what was going on. Let's not forget about the Jesus that as he walked by a tree that wasn't bearing fruit, that he cursed the tree because it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. And the next day when they walked by, the tree was dead. And let's not forget about the Jesus that when he saw the religious leaders who were abusing people, that he called them out. And he said, you vipers, you blind guides, you fools, you sons of hell. That's the Jesus that walked the earth. And we often like to look towards the grace-giving Jesus, which he is. We'll get to that in a second. But we must not forget that just as much as Jesus is the Lamb of God Jesus, he is also the Lion of Judah Jesus. And as the Lion of Judah, that means he is a king. And he demands respect. And when we come to grips with that, we'll start to realize that he is the king and that I am not. That he's the king and I'm not. And when we recognize he's the king and I'm not, there is only one proper response. And it's the response that John had. This is what it says, Revelation chapter 1, verse 17. When I saw him, when I, meaning John, saw him, Jesus, I fell at his feet as if I were dead. I fell at his feet as if I was dead. When I caught a glimpse of of Jesus, when I caught a glimpse of the Lion of Judah, the only thing I could do was fall on my face as though I was dead. Because that's the response that we give when we come into contact with the King. And guys, I'll be honest, that's one of those reasons why I don't buy into these books like 90 Minutes in Heaven or Heaven is for Real. These books about people who've died and saw the light and they go to heaven, then they come back because they got revived and they tell about their heavenly stories. Because all those books, they're always about, yeah, when I was in heaven, I did this and I saw this and I did that. Guys, let me tell you, that's not what's going to happen. When we come into the presence of God, there's going to be one response, and the only response that's going to hit it first is I'm going to fall on my face. I know that in good intentions, we'll say things like this: when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask Jesus this, or I'm going to ask him this, or I want to go find this person. No, let me tell you, when you get to heaven, you're going to fall on your face, whether you want to or not, because he's the king and I am not. But listen to the next part of the verse, because here's just the beauty of the king that we serve. John fell on his face as though he was dead. And he gave a message, meaning Jesus. But he, Jesus, laid his right hand on me and said, "Don't be afraid." The Lion of Judah, the King of Kings that we bow down in front of, Jesus' reaction is this: he reached down and he touches him on the shoulder. He reached down and he puts his hand on his head. He reaches down and says, "Don't be afraid. It's okay." And I love that, because that takes us back to this grace-giving God. It takes us back to this Jesus who says, listen, you've responded right, so you don't need to be afraid. You don't need to live in fear. I think what Jesus is communicating here to John is, hey, you don't need to be afraid of me, because I see you, I understand you, and I love you. But I think he's also saying this as well. But you also need to communicate not to be afraid. You need to let the world know not to be afraid. Because again, remember, the purpose of this letter was a writing to people who were living around the 90 AD time, who were going through tons of persecution, and they were living in fear. They were questioning God. They were wondering if they had missed the resurrection, that Jesus maybe had come and taken up his church and went away. So people were questioning their faith. They were questioning why these bad things were happening. They were questioning why somebody they knew was dying because of persecution. They had all these things. And Jesus communicates a message to John. Tell the church, don't be afraid. Why? Because I'm the first and the last. That's the first thing I need you to remember. Secondly, I'm the living one. I was dead, but look, I am alive forever and ever. Thirdly, and I hold the keys to death and the grave. I want you to hear what Jesus is communicating to John, and he's telling John to communicate to the church that you do not need to live in fear, because I am the first and the last. I am alive and I hold the keys. Pull this message together. Let's look at that deeper. Here's what this means. It means this. One, I'm still in charge. Jesus is looking at John and he's saying, tell the church, I'm still in charge. I know that you're living in a crazy upside down world. I know that there's all kinds of wars going on. I know that there's an emperor in the land who is claiming to be the King of Kings. I know there's an emperor in the land who's saying everyone has to worship me. But I want to remind you, John, and I want you to remind the church, I'm still in charge. Go back to verse 8. Jesus said, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the one who was and is to come. I'm in charge. So don't fret. But secondly, he says, and tell the church this, I'm still in charge because I'm still alive. I rose from the dead, and what you witnessed back then, some 60 years ago, when I showed myself to everybody for 40 days, and then I ascended up into heaven, I'm still here. I'm still alive. The hope you received from my resurrection is still a hope that you can grab a hold of today. So when the church is wrestling with, has Jesus already come back? Did we miss it? What was our faith in vain? Do we not understand this coming king, this living Messiah? When the church is wrestling with that, Jesus says, John, you tell the church, I'm still alive. I'm still alive. I still see what's going on. Don't worry, because I'm still in charge. And I'm still alive. And I still hold the keys. Jesus is looking at him going, listen, I still hold the keys. That when I died on the cross and I went to the grave, I conquered the grave. And I conquered death. And I still hold the keys. So when people are worried and they're struggling because death is happening all around them, remind them of the other world that they cannot see right now. And remind them that they don't have to fear death, because when they pass from this life to the next life, I hold the keys to death. And they get to come to this other world where they get to live with me as the living one for all of eternity. Amen. That's the message of Revelation chapter 1. You might say, well, okay, how does that help me? How does that apply today? Because the secret of looking at God's word is seeing the context of when it was written and then applying it to how does it work today? What is God still trying to communicate today? Well, this is a pretty easy one, I think. Just curious, by the showing of hands here, if you're watching online, C3, whatever, have you ever had to deal with a tragedy, a loss of life, an illness in your life? Anybody? Did you need to remember that he was still in charge? Because when that tragedy comes, that hardship hits, persecution, although we don't deal with it a whole lot today like they did back then, or like they do in other parts of the world still today, do you need to remember, hey, he's still in charge? When you think about that hardship that you might be wrestling with and going through, realizing, wow, he's still in charge. That I'm living in this crazy world where I can't make sense of what's up and what's down, what's right and what's wrong. I got people all around me saying that this is the way life should be now, where you can say, no, wait, remember, he's still in charge. Or maybe you've hit that place in your faith where you've wondered, is my faith in vain? Like, man, I put my faith in God, but I thought life would get a lot better, and all of a sudden I'm dealing with all these struggles, and maybe he's not really there. Maybe he's not truly alive like he said he was. Maybe that was just an emotional response I had back then. That's when we need to remember, just like the early church, no, he's still alive. He's still alive. And your faith is not in vain. That he still longs for a relationship with you. That he still wants you to go on this great adventure of life with him. That he's still alive. Or maybe what you have to remember today is that he holds the keys. That he holds the keys. Because maybe your biggest fear is not the book of Revelation. Maybe your biggest fear is, what's going to happen when I die? Because I just don't have a clear understanding of heaven or the afterlife or if there's anything at all. Maybe what you need to hear today is that Jesus holds the keys to death and the grave. As we move into a time of response right now, I want us to wrestle with those. And I want us to think, man, what's our proper way to respond right now? Well, I think the proper way to respond is for us all to bow a knee. I mean, that's really honestly the best way for us all to respond. Again, when John recognized Jesus, he fell on his face. When Isaiah in the Old Testament got carried into heaven in Isaiah 6, he fell on his face. When Paul, or Saul as his name was at the time, received a blinding light from Jesus, and Jesus said, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Saul fell on his face. A proper response is for us to bend a knee. And maybe this morning, that's the way you go. You know what? That's what I need to do before my King. And if you want to do that, I invite you. We've got communion set up front. You can come up and take communion if you're here on our Conway campus. Or maybe go over to the side by the baptistry or go over to the prayer corner and just bend a knee. I know last week I was praying with a guy. He said, man, I need to surrender my life to Jesus. And we could have just hung out in the back, but we ended up just walking to the front. And there's nothing magical about coming up front, but there is something about physically bowing a knee. And we got down on our knees, just as men. And we just said, all right, we're going to surrender to the Lord right now. An act of worship. Maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to turn and just kneel down right on your chair. It's okay. You have permission to do that if that's the response you feel like God's calling you to do. But once we acknowledge Jesus as King, then the secondary response I'd say is this. Say a simple prayer this morning and ask God this. What is a message that you have for me today? Because maybe what you need to hear today from this book and from God is, hey, I'm still in charge. I've got your back. I've got you covered. It's going to be okay. Or maybe the message you need to hear from God this morning is, hey, your faith isn't in vain. I'm still walking through you. Still walking with you, still working through you. Or maybe you need to hear today that he's got the keys. That he's still got the keys. See, maybe you feel like this. Maybe you feel like, man, that you've been locked up in a jail cell right now. Maybe you feel like you're in a pit and there's this cage in front of you and you feel like you're locked in and you're like, I can't get out. I want you to realize that Jesus holds the keys. And what that means is on the day that he went to the cross and he died for our sin and 3 days later rose from the dead, he had the keys in his hand. And when he rose from the dead, he stuck the keys into that lock and he opened the lock. He unlocked the gate right then. And when he unlocked the gate, he provided freedom for everyone. But you might find yourself going, but no, I'm still behind the gate. The gate's locked. No, push on the gate. It's wide open. It's wide open. He still holds the keys. Satan can't come and lock that gate. Jesus has the keys to death and the grave. So surrender to him and walk through that gate and find freedom. The freedom that he purchased. Would you stand with me? I'm going to pray. And then I encourage you to respond. And if today's that day you're like, I need freedom. I need to surrender my life to Jesus for the first time ever. Please come talk to me. Come talk to me or one of our other pastors, one of our prayer counselors. We would love to talk to you at the Connect Corner. Right behind you, right there. I'll be standing right there. I'd love to help you find freedom as you surrender to Jesus Christ. Pray with me. Jesus, thank you for this morning. And thank you for the way that you move. Thank you that you are alive. That you are in charge. And that you give freedom. God, I pray that right now that we will respond to the things we've discovered. In your name. Let's respond.